Welcome back. For those who have witnessed yesterday's lecture by Jed Wentz, this is a sequel to that one, more focusing on the practical realization than yesterday. Our guest speaker of today is João Paixão. He was a student here for historical singing, and since that time he has developed a specialty in historical acting and is a kind of leading figure in the experiments and new projects that has been launched in this field. He is very active throughout Europe, and he also teaches master classes on the subject, also in our school. We're very happy to welcome João, and we wish you a very pleasant and informative, exciting workshop here. If there are questions, please ask them through the chat or on the YouTube, and we will see if we can collect them and eventually answer them if they are relevant enough. Welcome, João.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm incredibly excited to be here today. Looking forward to doing work, or continuing, better said, the work that we already started with the students. And I would like to thank Johannes for the introduction and Minika for the opportunity. It is not always that one can work on this material with instrumentalists. I would also like to thank Jed for yesterday's lecture and workshop. It's not really possible to work on what we are going to work today without establishing well those basic principles and conceptions of the body and the soul and how the passions act upon it in the 18th century, 17th and 18th century. But today, the work will be extremely practical. We will be straddling declamation and music with exercises that are meant to bring some of the skills that are developed in declamation and adapt them to music. Now, one question could be, right away, why bring declamation into this? Now, Jed has already pointed one, which is a fundamental reason which we find in historical sources, and that is that the musicians themselves, and Quantz, for example, mentions that the musician and the orator should look up to each other. They should imitate each other. And I think this is not a metaphor only. I think this really means a literal imitation of each other's capabilities of engaging an audience through what they want to communicate. So this is connected, of course, with axio in rhetoric, as Jed mentioned. There are a couple of other reasons that I think I should bring up, since they are particularly connected to my experience as a performer adapting these techniques. The first one is rather general, and that is to embolden execution. Now, embolden in the sense I'm using it and actually copying it from a source from the beginning of the 17th century. So this is one of the first sources we have addressed specifically to actors, and it's called An Apology for Actors by Thomas Heywood, 1612. And he mentions that in universities at the time, people studying to be lawyers or preachers had still to put up plays in university. And he says that the reason for this, and I quote, was for the emboldening of junior scholars, and that it teacheth audacity to the bashful grammarian. Now, obviously, none in this conference is a bashful grammarian. So we're talking here of performers that have experience on stage, and to a certain degree, they are not bashful. From my personal experience, I have to admit that there have been many situations on stage in which I would have appreciated to be just a bit more daring, that I could have expressed just a bit more deeply the pathos of the moment. And so that would be a first general reason, which, by the way, has something to do with what Jed brought to the table yesterday, and that is that the passions are events that take soul and body and that change the aspect distinctively. So they act upon the body. They happen through the body. So in a sense, we could say that trying to work on the passions in the 18th century sense without engaging physically, it is a bit the same as if we would try to learn how to play the viola da gamba without a viola da gamba. It's the instrument of the passions which needs to be played to resound the passions, and that instrument is the body. So that is one general reason. The second reason is a bit more particular to the work on declamation itself, and it has to do with bringing together declamation and music, to bridge the gap between how we speak and how we play. And for that, I will be bringing a couple of quotes. So these quotes will approach the subject from a point of view of music speaking, but also speaking having to sing. So if we can desire for music to speak more, we should also wish to hear speaking sing more. Now, how this can be possible, it is so unusual nowadays, we will investigate today. And so I will jump to the first quote, which is right at the end of the 17th century, and it is by the librettist of The Fairy Queen. In his preface, he mentions, "And he must be a very ignorant player, who knows not there is a musical cadence in speaking, and that a man may as well speak out of tune as sing out of tune." So I find this speaking out of tune very interesting. It's not a concept that we would usually employ nowadays, but I think it speaks of a time that was carefully crafting speech. The other quote is at the other end of the 18th century, of this era, so by the end of the 18th century, and it is from one of the sources we will work on today, and that is The Melody of Speaking, delineated by the actor and pedagogue John Walker. And he says, "The singing sound is a monotone, and the speaking sound a slide or inflection. But though singing and speaking sounds are thus essentially distinct, it must not be imagined that singing tones are never to be used in speaking. Far from it. The monotone is not only productive of the greatest variety, but often forms the greatest beauty of solemn, sublime, and plaintive pronunciation, so that verse, properly pronounced, is sometimes not only figuratively, but literally a song." And here again, we have this image brought up before our ears of a type of declamation which, though not being categorized as music, would have sounded as if someone could write it down exactly with the pitches and the notes on the staff. So this is the sort of context that we will use to stimulate the work today. This is not, of course, a full picture. There is no time for such a picture, but it is, in any case, an intriguing challenge. So I will now just mention briefly, so we are all aware of the sources I will be using today. So, of course, there is a musical piece. It is so Sonata in G minor by Abel. A treatise on gestures, or it's on rhetorical delivery, but specifically on gestures, a very important treatise for gesture by Gilbert Austin, beginning of the 19th century. And two treatises by John Walker. One is Elements of Elocution, and the second one is The Melody of Speaking, delineated, from which we read the quote. Lastly, we will use an excerpt from a collection of dramatic texts ordered under passions and attitudes, very importantly, from 1724, and this is a Thesaurus Dramaticus that has plenty of material to give us an idea of the passions on the stage. The choice that based this, the criteria for the choice of these sources on the face of it, it is partly because of the English language. There is, of course, a certain facility that arises from working in English, though not for everyone, of course, but as a starting point. But the main reason, actually, to choose these sources is because both Walker and Austin were part of a movement in England that was devoted to annotation and studying of rhetorical delivery, of axio. And they left us good indications to what the acting style and aesthetic intuition might have been. So they are important for this reason. I will be starting now with a practical work. Now, we got from Jed yesterday that indeed the passions have specific characteristics to each one of them. So it is not just one body of more or less distinct spontaneous states, but in the 18th century they are indeed very distinct as to the expression. Before working, though, on all the traits or some of the traits of these passions on the voice, there is one aspect of declamation that is fundamental and on which we can build the work that we will do afterwards. And this concept is emphasis or accent. So when we speak, I think most people would jump from accented syllable to accented syllable, and in between leave a number of syllables that are unaccented, unimportant, and let's say played differently. So I will give an example of this with a phrase taken from Gilbert Austin's Chironomia. This is an example he uses to exhibit some principles of gesture. But I will ask, I don't know if you can, this one I actually...
Oui, ça c'est toi.
Was there a mic? A wrong mic, yes, okay. So I would like to have... maybe Alex, would you like? Can you see? It's the same one that we worked on.
Yeah.
So could you just simply read the phrase?
Yeah. It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
Okay. So naturally, so Alex is an English speaker, and naturally, of course, there are some words that take precedence, some syllables in certain words that take precedence. I will now ask you, Alex, again, if you can repeat this, but with no distinction. So try to make every syllable exactly the same length, exactly the same intensity.
It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
Okay, so besides being ridiculous, of course we take it as ridiculous, but it becomes incredibly difficult to understand the meaning. Second, understand the posture of the speaker as to the meaning that they are conveying. What's their opinion about the meaning that their words convey? And third, it becomes super monotonous if after 10 minutes of having this speech, you have to go through another 40 minutes. It's just a dismal prospect. So I would ask Magda to try to read then as, well, the emphasis that Alex had in the beginning, but try to expand on those emphases. So the words that you think you would naturally emphasize, try to emphasize them a bit further.
It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
Good, so the way that the emphasis is crafted has to do with many agogic, dynamic, rhythmical, melodic properties. One of them is how it is detached from what surrounds it. There are small pauses, hesitations, suspensions around the emphasis. And so one way of making this visually clear, of course, because that is the purpose of this treatise, is to associate gestures to it. And so the gestures will have an effect on how it sounds. So I will ask us three, if we can, to just stand up and well, perhaps you could, where you could move your arms slightly. Okay, and so we will do this together. I will do it first to refresh your memories, but Austin left us some gestures, and these gestures are supposed to be one-on-one with the meaning, to make it extremely clear what is meant and how it relates to each other in, how the meanings relate to each other in the phrase. So, he proposes to say it is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times. So the gestures are, of course, on the emphatic syllables, but they further emphasize them. Let's try to have just the first particle, which is, it is an old observation.
It is an old observation.
Magda?
It is an old observation.
Very good. And now we go to the second part, which is the parenthesis. But not therefore the less true.
But not therefore the less true.
But not therefore the less true.
That no man is wise at all times.
That no man is wise at all times.
That no man is wise at all times.
Very good. So I would ask Alex and then Magda to try it again. And now, let's bring the gesture to a level of snappiness, of explosion, that is just slightly more contrasting with the syllables that are not gestured, not emphasized.
The whole text?
The whole text, please, if you can. I can pitch you in if it is necessary.
It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
Good, Magda.
It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
Good. So there are some glottals, some characteristics that come, no man is wise at all times. There is suddenly an all times that is visceral and that carries an energy with it that is different than if we would be rationally speaking it. So it conveys an energy to the public. So what I would wish is, could you now play the first two bars of the Abel? And the objective is simply, if you have in mind some emphasis that you are planning to bring out, then try to bring them out maybe a bit further, as if you would be gesturing with it in a very enthusiastic, bombastic way. Okay, so I will be doing some, how to say, injustices to the music. It might be shocking. I would myself not play it as we will try to play them in the end, but it is just an exercise. It is just to see how far can we stretch these characteristics. So we try the first two bars. Very good, very good. I think it was, well, they of course know what they're doing, so we couldn't really compare any change, but that's not the purpose either. It's just that I heard emphasis. I heard moments of anchoring that definitely took much more space, were much more important than other notes. And those points are important to convey the meaning that the music is conveying, in the same way that when we speak, we will accent different words for meaning. For example, if I would say in the first, it is an old observation, but if I would accent, it is an old observation. Now, this would mean that I don't mean anything else but an observation. It's not a theory. It's an observation. So if I would do, it is an old observation, I would be meaning that someone else just contested and said, no, this is no observation, this is a new observation, or something that is antithetical to what I am saying. I will say, no, but it is an old observation. And so where the emphasis lies changes the meaning of the very same words, and so we can expect that where the emphasis lies on the music changes its meaning if we are to accept, as many in the 18th century did, that music has meaning, that it is a vehicle for meaning. Good. There is another aspect that can be explored with this exercise. So sorry, I'll ask you again to get up. There's going to be a lot of activity today. So, and that is what actually Walker presents as being the rhetorical pause. And this is, he says, moments where we can make a pause without disrupting the flow of thought. So, for example, we have, of course, the punctuation. So the punctuation is a moment where we can stop, suspend, with no detrimental effect to the meaning. So if I would do it, it is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times. So these are the punctuations. So I would ask you to explore, how far you could go, pausing, without feeling that, okay, I just, yeah, this was too much. So try to really get that suspension going.
It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
That is good. Magda, could you try even more?
It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
Good. So Magda even introduced some little ones that are not coincidental with the punctuation. So in the end, that no man is wise at all times. And this is exactly the rhetorical pause. So Walker says that we can even and should, if we are in a big space, if the meaning is difficult to understand, which is not the case here, we should make pauses where they are not indicated by the punctuation. So for example, it is an old observation. So I will not make a big pause, but it is possible to make a pause there. But not therefore the less true. So that we have a pause, we have a silence, but it's a silence that carries a direction. So do you think you could explore just a bit this again? So to try to preserve the pauses in the punctuation, but then in other places, check if it is possible to introduce an exciting new pause.
It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
Good. Could you try to do that again with the gesture?
Oh, yeah. It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no man is wise at all times.
Good. Magda, give it a try.
It is an old observation, but not therefore the less true, that no one is wise at all times.
Good. So it can be sometimes a bit jagged, but on the other hand, when many people are speaking and thinking while they are speaking, there are moments of reflection, if you know what I mean. There are moments in which everyone looking knows perfectly well that the brain is speeding, but that we are waiting for what comes out of it. So it even gives this feeling of anticipation. Oh my God, the person is stopping. They are not speaking, but they are definitely in what they are speaking, so there must be something terribly interesting coming out next. Actually, the way I just expressed it is found in a source in the 18th century. So it's just this anticipation, this excitement. Could we try then to explore that in the piece as well? So, for example, if there were moments where you thought, well, this is this sort of punctuation moment, there's an emphasis, but it sort of ends a certain particle, allow it to maybe breathe a bit more and see how far it can go, even if it means not following exactly the rhythm.
bars again?
The first two bars again. Actually, if you would add the third bar as well, so that it really ends the first phrase.
Oh, yeah, the phrase, yeah.
Good. Would you mind giving it another try? I thought there were wonderful things in it. Just to explore further. So there seem to be some moments which are privileged for this sort of interjection or suspension. If, for example, in the moments that Magda's part has a, let's say, a suspension that she can make, would you please, well, look at her to her upbeat, and then really just, in a sense, stop the flow you're having, so you just finish off the notes you think belong to the previous particle, and then wait for her to announce when will I start after the comma.
Okay, yeah.
Just. Wow, bravo. It was really nice. I think it was pretty clear. And regardless of us wanting to use this resource specifically here, I think it is a resource that is worth stretching and exercising so that it is ready when we feel that the meaning in a certain phrase would benefit from a moment of heavy reflection or some passion, there we go, that would need that. So this is as far as we can work on this emphasis. And it's important that these prevail and that they are always there even when then we work on the passions on top of them. Now, there is another aspect of the emphasis, which is that when we speak, the emphasis have pitch information. So there are slides up and down that also lead the attention of the listener to the meaning, to the connection of the ideas in the phrase. And this is exactly something that John Walker investigated a lot, and he left us some diagrams, some texts annotated with respect to pitch, so what he called the inflection. The moment in the phrase where the voice stops going up and starts going down, for example. So this here is one of the diagrams found in his Elements of Elocution. And as you can see, it is pretty straightforward. There are words that go down. I just, by the way, copied fresh on top because the original is sometimes not very easy to read. So I invite you just to read the top one. It's just easier to, I think it's clear. So in the top one you see that there are words that go up and words that go down. Most importantly, at the hooks, the angles, this is where we have a change of inflection, and he says this is where the emphasis lies. So a word that marks a change, so the first word after a change of inflection is an emphatic word. So I would ask you, I think you have a copy of that, so I would ask Magda, would you like to read or try? There is no final answer as to how to perform this, but if you would give it a try, please. With yeah, suggestion.
If virtue must have a word, it is our interest to be virtuous.
Okay, so it is more or less what is there. It has this organization, and it has emphasis. So we didn't lose the emphasis. We just gave it a direction. Alex, would you like to give it a try?
If virtue must have a reward, it is our interest to be virtuous.
All right, could you try that, for example, must is relatively higher as well as the last virtuous, so that the virtuous doesn't sag down too much, but that ver is actually higher than interest to be, so that the ver is actually the highest point in the end.
Oh, yeah. If virtue must have a reward, it is our interest to be virtuous.
So it is interesting that even visually, there are blank spaces that coincide with so-called rhetorical pauses. They can have silences and they don't damage the meaning, the conveying of the meaning. So I will now propose an exercise in slight oral composition. But for this, I will even suggest that people watching us would do the same, and that is, I'll give 3 or 4 minutes in which I will ask each of you to compose a musical line, so in pitches, with some sort of rhythmical pattern and pitch pattern that would fit this text. So let's say you are in charge of setting this text to some sort of melody that would make it still understandable when someone would sing it. And of course, you do it in your instrument, so I don't want you to sing. So it is, how would you play this phrase, basically? So it's a small exercise in composition, going up here, going down there, with your taste. So what kind of intervals, I will leave that open. And while I wait, I would also suggest that people at home, if you have an instrument, you would do it as well. But if you have a voice, I think it could be just something to hum along and see, now, would I want this to be a recit? Would like this to be a song? So yes, I will start the watch. And I won't take too much time, but I do think that it is a stimulating challenge. So 3-4 minutes from now. And sorry to disturb, I will invite you actually to try it and play it, so that it is not so much, and at home as well, that it becomes something that one tries, that it is not just like, oh yeah, I think this could be sort of okay. But it's nice to try.
Oh my God. I have a spare. I have also. Okay.
Well, we take a small break. All right, one extra minute. I don't want Magda to be left out. So maybe now we can give it a try, you think?
Sure, yeah.
All right, well, either one of you.
Fine, okay.
All right, Magda? Good. So this is the template. It's very nice. I don't know what everyone came up with at home. My singer brain cannot help but bring sort of recit-like fashion of setting this. I can give an example in a second, but what I would like is to try again, but now letting the speaking part of it feed into the execution of the musical translation, so that what before got an emphasis. So if virtue must have a reward, it is our interest to be virtuous, so that we get a clear idea of where those emphases are.
Okay.
So you did, I heard, it is our interest to be virtuous.
Yeah.
Right? Right?
Yeah, interest to be virtuous.
Virtuous. Okay, okay. Now, good. So that emphasis was there, a little rhetorical pause before. Magda. It is fine. I want. Yeah, it's not about getting the perfect rendition, but many aspects in the beginning worked fine. For example, what I did here in the playing was if virtue. So I heard an if that I believe I didn't hear you speaking in that way. So it's just to refresh again. If we would say if virtue, then the if is much less important as an upbeat. Than in another text. In another text, that could be the good upbeat. But it's just to try to see how would I say it, and then to play it in that way. You think you could try again? All right, right. No, but good, good. It's it is an ongoing process that I think it needs to happen in our minds, is that if we want to own a material, which is written by Abel in this case, it is interesting to sometimes get into both his tacit knowledge, which is the actors he heard all the time, and also his explicit, deliberate enterprises that had to do with how to carve the music into a specific expression. So in this sense, when playing, for example, with a singer, then it is just important to think what could be behind the way that the composer chose to set this word or that word. And that ultimately would come back to speaking again. But good. So this is a bit of research on the emphasis. Now, Walker went further with this, and he also realized that this is an emphasis of sense. So it is an emphasis meant to clarify the sense of a sentence, so the logical sense. He also said that there is another type of emphasis, which is the pathetic emphasis, so emphasis of passion. And this, he said, doesn't affect a specific syllable. It affects a whole portions of a text, so that when the passion sets on, all of the syllables are not equally affected. They still have their hierarchy from the emphasis of sense, but they get all a coloring on top. So one example we can have of this is an annotated speech that he has of Portia's speech on mercy of Shakespeare. And as you can see, I don't know if it's too small. Well, here it is definitely too small in the whole, but at home you might be able to see that there are some accents that he places on specific syllables. Those are still the inflections, so the small emphasis with the voice sliding up or down, and he also has a dash, which is what we read earlier on, that there is a monotone when people speak for sublime effects. So that is when the voice stays in the same tone and continues on the same note for solemnity. And one thing that he does here is that he divides this speech in 3 sections. And they are divided into pathetic sections. He characterizes the first as persuasive entreaty, soft middle tone, so middle register. The second is solemn monotone, lower. So the voice goes lower, and we have a solemn monotone. We will see why he chooses this in the context of the text, but the last one is rapture, high, strong tone. So we see here demands on the register, and we see that they are connected to the passions. So we start seeing a vocal manifestation of the passions. We will try to go through this text to give a sort of template for the ear, and I will try to read the first section, and then I would say, Alex, you can read the second one, the monotone one, and Magda the last one. And for now, we will not pay attention yet to the pathetic accent. We will first get through the small accents that he gives there as suggestions. So I will begin. The quality of mercy is not strained. It droppeth as the gentle rain from heaven upon the place beneath. It is twice blessed. It blesseth him that gives and him that takes. 'Tis mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown.
His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings.
But mercy is above this scepter's sway. It is enthroned in the hearts of kings. It is an attribute to God himself, and earthly power that then show likes God when mercy seasoned justice.
Good. So all the emphasis of sense were there. So I think that although in maybe a peculiar way, it rendered the understanding of this text a bit easier. But now I would like to focus on the pathetic accent. So we will not read the whole thing, but there are these moments of transition. So from "'Tis mightiest in the mightiest," the 2 lines of the first section, we will go until "It is enthroned in the hearts of kings." So the objective now will be to make sure that there is a perceptible change in the register of the voice, and then we will try to do the change in passion as well. So first, just a perceptible change. Alex, would you like to try? So 2 verses before the solemn monotone and 2 verses afterwards.
A perceptible change in the tone?
In the register of the voice. So while you will hover in the beginning in the middle register, in your usual sort of register, you will have to be able to then speak consistently lower than that, and then perceptibly higher than where you started.
Okay.
So it could be a heightened, energetic effusion. It's just more enthusiastic in the end.
From "'Tis mightiest"?
"'Tis mightiest."
Yeah. "'Tis mightiest in the mightiest, it becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptered sway, it is enthroned in the hearts of kings."
Good. A small comment. There were moments in the high rapture tone in which you quickly slid almost as low than the solemn monotone. It is a slightly uncomfortable situation to be in, where suddenly we have to speak higher. It's just not a position we would like to be in life, when we have to speak like that. And it's just not a place we go to often. But in any case, I would like you to give it another try. And however contrived you might feel, that it does seem like it's a different pitch. So if I am here speaking, I will then go here in the low, and then I will go there to speak the other 2 lines, okay?
"'Tis mightiest in the mightiest, it becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this sceptered sway, it is enthroned in the hearts of kings."
This was more perceptible, yes.
Okay.
So, good. It wasn't, how to say, screaming, and it wasn't a squeezed sound at all. But it was consistently higher. Good. Magda, would you like to try the same piece?
"'Tis mightiest in the mightiest, it becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above this scepter sway, it is enthroned in the hearts of kings."
Good, just until there. That was good. So there, if I would have to analyze the register you were using, mostly low middle register. So that the last register you used was fairly middle. So I would ask you to try now to start in that register where you now ended, so that you have really a lot of room to go lower, and everyone will understand that it's lower. And then a greater contrast to going into something as if speaking to a judge that you know is set against you. You know, it is in a desperate plea, so that people actually weren't listening to you, and now they will listen to me. Now you will listen to me, okay? So another attempt, please.
this mightiest in the mightiest. It becomes the throned monarch better than his crown. His scepter shows the force of temporal power, the attribute to awe and majesty, wherein doth sit the dread and fear of kings. But mercy is above his scepter's sway, it is enthroned in the hearts of king.
Good. So the register in the end was there. Curiously enough, you started very, very low. And then the middle, solemn monotone, went a bit higher and higher and higher. And so it ended up in the middle register, more or less. But the effect, I would say, was still fine, despite the beginning starting too low.
Try and keep the register in the middle.
Right, it was so that it would start somewhere. "'Tis mightiest in the mightiest," in a comfortable middle, so that there is room to go just very deeper and very darker in that middle section. And then what we actually have sources for, sometimes a jump of an octave in the actor's voice, transitioning from a section to another, two verses that suddenly could be, "and fear of kings, but mercy is above this sceptered sway," so that it is speaking, but it is using a conscious shift, a warp of pitch to have a specific effect. And this is associated to passions. So, to connect to the passions. In this text, there is persuasive entreaty, so there is something a bit more collected, a bit more rational, that then turns into a depiction of the earthly power, which is represented in this case by Shylock trying to get justice on the loan that he made to Antonio. And this representation of everything that is earthly power, which is justice, is lowly. It is a dark reality that generates fear and dread in the subjects. And this is contrasted with rapture, which is another passion. So this is a passion of, transport, adoration, something that lifts us out of the ground into higher values and higher dimensions, which is precisely the point being made with mercy. So that mercy is above justice. So justice is an earthly power, and mercy should be of the clouds, of God, of heaven. So that both literally there is a distinction spatially, but also those are associated with a passion. So solemn, terrible, horrible descriptions are low, and rapturous descriptions push us high. So this is already an aspect of the passions that have to do with their pitch, and how the pitch helps us distinguish which passions we have. Good, so we just leave this text for now. Thank you. And we will go on with another piece of text. And now, let's say we will really start the experimental part, because we will pick up 6 verses from this Thesaurus Dramaticus. These are the last 6 verses of a tragedy by Ambrose Phillips, 1712, and they are, the play is called The Distressed Mother, but it is a translation, a transformation of Racine, Jean Racine's Andromaque. And so the main character is, of course, Andromache, that here says the last 6 lines. And they are supposed to be a sum up of all the troubles and sufferings undergone through the tragedy, and summing them up with a ray of hope. In the Thesaurus Dramaticus, this is represented as a text emblematic of fortitude. Fortitude meaning perseverance, courage and resilience in the face of danger and suffering. And naturally, it will have examples of associated passions. So passions that occur surrounding fortitude. And those I tried, and this is not in the source, I tried to very simply enumerate on the side, which we know is also a practice of the time to add marginalia to dramatic text so that the actors could very much focus on the exact expression they wanted for each verse. So reading the text, we realize it's a sum up of the whole play, and it has contrasting pairs, which is very interesting. So I will just read it. Though plunged in ills and exercised in care, yet never let the noble mind despair. When pressed by dangers and beset with foes, the gods their timely succor interpose. And when our virtue sinks, o'erwhelmed with grief, by unforeseen expedients bring relief. As you understood, I'm not reading it pathetically at all. So this is just the body of the text, and what I tried to add as a way of then coloring the expression is some passions that are associated with fortitude, and that I think are represented by these verses. So in the first one, I conceived of as pity, as empathy or sympathy for someone else's sufferings, as someone that has felt them themselves. In the second, yet never let the noble mind despair, we will have courage. So in a sense, the very encouragement of fortitude to all sufferers around. And then when pressed by dangers and beset with foes, there has to be a moment of a certain dread, which I put under astonishment. It could be many other things. This is definitely not written in stone, but it's just a framework. For the next verse, the gods their timely succor interpose. It is joy as a result of when we are surrounded by enemies, God saves us, so there is a relief there. And when our virtue sinks, overwhelmed with grief, well, overwhelmed with grief just says it all. It could be even desperation, but I leave it at grief. And finally, again, joy. We could call it relief, but for ease sake, I'll put joy. By unforeseen expedients bring relief. If we try to say what kind of characteristics we hear in several sources, Walker included, we associate with certain passions, so just the vocal characteristics. Jed talked yesterday, of course, about how the body will influence and generate these very vocal expressions. But what we have, strictly speaking, to these passions, we have, for example, pity as being expressed full, tender, lamenting. So full being with a body to the sound. It is not a very soft passion. Courage is strong, full-mouthed, articulate, firm, even. Astonishment is low, emphatic, with energy. Joy is sweet, full, easy, rising often to very high notes. And finally, grief is feeble, so it's weak, dragging, and plaintive. So we will just workshop a bit. I think we have time. Workshop a bit this text. I will first just to give some food for thought. I will try, and I will go back here. Although I would like to have the camera on me, so I will try to give a sort of rendition, a very exaggerated rendition of what could some of these expressions produce in the body and in the voice. Though plunged in ills and exercised in care, yet never let the noble mind despair. When pressed by dangers and beset with foes, the gods their timely succor interpose. And when our virtue sinks, overwhelmed with grief, by unforeseen expedients, bring relief. So, having this as a sort of template, which of course could be different, but having this as a template, I would like to now work a bit on the vocal expression. So I tried as much as possible to follow some of these indications that we have here for the passions. And so what I would like to try is to go through each verse, following as much as possible some of these characteristics. There would be others which will be supplied by your own imagination. So, of course, this is not, it doesn't exhaust. And actually, as Jed mentioned yesterday, it never exhausts. So the pool of passion is inexhaustible, and so there is always a contribution that, of course, needs to be made by every one of us. So this is merely a guidance, so that we do try to preserve these characteristics. So starting with the first phrase, so I would like to hear your version of what would be to speak the first verse with a full, tender, lamenting tone. Maybe we start with Magda now.
Thou planks in ills and exercise in care.
Good. Alex.
Though plunged in ills and exercised in care.
Good. So two already different versions. I think that some of this was there. Alex wasn't so full. It was a bit more of a more subdued. And in this, it is maybe interesting to bring out one characteristic of pity, and that is, it is an active passion. Why? Because whereas others are in grief and they are themselves hopeless and no need to be energized, the person that has pity is a person that is driven towards someone else. So, in a sense, it is worry. It is a wish to rescue them from a situation, and at the same time, the impossibility of doing it in that precise moment. So, try then to carve a bit deeper on this scenario.
Again?
Yes, we can start again with Mike.
Can I stand up?
Yes, please stand up if you...
Yeah, we should both.
Yeah, that's good.
Thou planks in ills and exercise in care.
Good. So I like that one of the means of expression was a sort of, how do you say, a belly in the notes. So it had this, which, however, how do you say, cliche we might find it, it does remind one, say, more of pity and grief than of anger. Therefore, it works. So it is, I think, a very nice use of these resources. Alex.
Though plunged in ills and exercised in care.
Good. So now let's try to physically get our weight on the front foot, still with the paper, but imagine that it is a very active and, in a sense, tense wish to an attraction towards an object that is in suffering, so that you are not in a comfortable situation at all. It has to be uncomfortable. So it has to be something pulling you forward in suffering. Okay? Let's try it again.
Thou planks in ills and exercised in care.
Very good.
Though plunged in ills and exercised in care.
All right. So this would be some of the material to work on. Pity. We move on to courage. So now it will be basically the opposite. If we had this nervous drive, which gave us some tenderness to the voice, now we don't have tenderness. So courage does not have tenderness. It is strong, full-mouthed, articulate, firm, even. So let's give it a go for the next line. Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Good. Could we have this as a proclamation, in the sense that everyone needs to hear it? Okay, so it is not said to yourself, it is really to convince everyone that you're so decisive that they should be decisive as well about this.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Alex?
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Good. So one thing that brings us back to the work on the Porsche speech is that if we start already too low, and we want the phrase to cadence lower, we might lose strength by going to the lower register. Unless we, of course, have an instrument that we know is very powerful in the low register. But if you want to preserve the strength throughout, which is what is demanded by courage, let's have it even, firm, until the very end, so that we don't have something that sort of fades away. So have it pounded, nailed, until the very end of the verse, okay? So in a sense, not going so much down and starting maybe even a bit higher in pitch.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Great.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Good. And now I would like to add a gesture, which I used, but I think we could use as well, which is this gesture of rejection for never. And allow that the end is as long as the gesture takes to unravel. So that you have let never. So it is almost irascible. It is almost prepared for a fight, okay? So allow yourself to have this movement that is just never. Me, never, okay? Something like that.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Wow, okay.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Good, and now we could add something which is a boasting on noble, which is saying, I am a noble mind, you are a noble mind, yet never let a noble mind despair. So noble also would get then an emphasis, without a gesture, but allow the noble to be full-mouthed. Noble mind, okay? We are presumptuous, okay? Magda.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Yet never let the noble mind despair.
Good. Okay, so through these ways, we managed to sort of carve a firm, even way of pronouncing these words, okay? We move now to astonishment. And now we have a description of something astonishing. So when pressed by dangers. I would like to try, if you now can go to a low, emphatic, energetic way of saying it. So it is almost as when people say, oh my God. Okay, so this is the sort of astonishment we have nowadays. But as you can see, it is described there. It is low, it is emphatic, and it is astonished. So in this sense, it's not exactly the same thing. It's not a comical. But so try to get a powerful, low, astonished tone.
When pressed by danger and beset with foes.
Alex?
When pressed by dangers and beset with foes.
Good. So this was a bit more narrative, a bit like the next blockbuster in summer. So, but it's nice. So imagine that this would be the central section in the Porsche speech. So you have the monotone, and that is, his scepter shows the force of temporal power, and it keeps on rising. Allow for some of it to be here as well. When pressed with dangers and beset. So something that keeps the tension up. So one last time.
When pressed by dangers and beset with foes.
When pressed by dangers and beset with foes.
Good, we move to the next one. Joy, sweet, full, easy, rising off into very high tones. And who better than the gods? Their timely succor interpose. So now it is fast, easy, well, vivace. It's just it jumps higher. And we will do just this one. But so, would you try this one?
The gods, they tiny sucker interpose.
The gods, their tiny sucker interpose.
Very good. And now could we have just a smile on the face, an exhilaration almost. So it's a painting of adoration. The gods, it's like they finally are here. Excitement. The gods, their timely succor interpose. Okay?
The gods, they tiny sucker interpose.
Okay, there. Good, good. That is very excited. Okay.
The gods, their tiny sucker interpose.
Good. And now to finish this, before we go and apply it to the music, I would like to have the pairs of contrasts. So we would have first the pity. So though plunge this that you had, and then a big contrast. Let yet never let, so that you really experience that from one to the other there is a massive change in expression. Okay? Could you try the first pair?
Though plunged in ills and exercised in care, never let the noble mind despair.
Good, Alex?
Though plunged in ills and exercised in care, yet never let the noble mind despair.
Good. Now the second pair, I won't go to the third pair, but just the second pair, which is the astonishment low, and again, the rapture high, the gods, their timely succor, okay?
When pressed by dangers and beset with foes, the gods their tiny succor interpose.
Alex?
When pressed by dangers and beset with foes, the gods their timely succor interpose.
Good. So in a sense, in your version, Alex, there was almost, it didn't become more excited. It suddenly, a relief. The gods, their time, which is perfectly possible, have nothing against it. We will just now try to move on to the Abel. And I have here just a few suggestions, and this is really just food for thought. So now we embodied certain passions. There are, of course, many more. The system is vast, but these are the ones that say we are working with now as a material. And I would propose that in this section, so you see here, it's the one that starts with bar 4, and that is annotated with some.
Oh yes.
So there are two excerpts. So it's the one that has pity, astonishment, joy. So I have no idea if Abel ever meant any of this. So you will forgive me, and we will just try to work as if these materials have to now become apparent in the musical execution. So with this embodied information that you had, this knowledge that we collected now from the literature, would it be possible to let the music be changed by this? I think I didn't do it totally random. So I do think that some of the aspects that we worked on the voice end up being manifested here in the music as well. So allow pity to have its own expression, astonishment and joy, etc. Okay? Give it a go. So you can start right away from upbeat to bar 6 until the double bar.
Okay.
You can continue. So that you continue until the double bar, until the... So you can start again. I liked it very much. Alex, would it be possible also that let's say the nature of the notes that you provide have also that sort of, well, in this case, tender, a bit more dragging characteristic to them? Yes, thank you. Good. This was very nice. Could somehow joy emerge out of the pit of astonishment in somehow a more noticeable way, so that it has this characteristic of easiness, of a certain kind of jumpy characteristic to it, so that the very articulation becomes less difficult and emphatic, as it has been in the 16th note passage, and it suddenly becomes a playful, light section. Could you try from the same place? I think it's very nice. Good. One last try at this excerpt, and could also the bass in Joy also get a more empty spaces, and so a bit more a staccato that gets the emphatic ones a bit more, and the other ones almost insignificant, so that we preserve this aspect of Joy, which is unimpeded, easy. There is nothing, it just flows. It's light, as Jed was saying yesterday. So once again from the same place, and actually, I add to that, if it's okay for you, that before astonishment, we get even a bit more time, so that we do have this punctuation, heightening our expectation to this change of affect, and then, if possible, the same in Joy. So allow yourself the time to revive, rekindle in you the imagination of Joy, because of course you came out of a turbulent section, and it would be interesting to have between the low note and the high note a sort of breath of relief. So you go boom, tum, ta da ta, something that does turn a page somehow. Okay. Very nice. I will move on to the last example. And in this one, I even wrote the small lines that, as we can see, are taken from the text we just worked on. So now, I didn't include the upbeat, but is it? Do you have it? So the upbeat 228. Okay, thank you. So, because of space. So, the objective now would be that somehow before playing the section, there is a coloring of the section by these words. So it's not just a passion in this case. It becomes even more rooted, more materialized by the fact that in pity we have, though plunged in ills, exercised in care, there is an image there. And for example, grief, we would then have when our virtue sinks. And for example, we even have a motive that goes down. So to connect that motive going down to something sinking. So when virtue sinks, basically it's when there is shame. So allowing it to go down in that coloring, overwhelmed with grief, all the swells of sobbing and etc. So again, try to use the rhetorical pause that is allowed at these punctuation articulation points to allow yourself time for your body, your imagination, to make the huge leap which is necessary to go from one affect to another affect, okay? So these shouldn't be just snappy things pasted together. It really needs time, even if the music is left suspended and the beat gets stopped for a bit, okay? This is very nice. I liked it very much. Could we try just one more time in which courage really sharply, I love the way we got to courage and how it started. If we could then use some resources of courage, which would be a certain overdotting, a boastful overdotting, which would have yet never let the noble mind, you know, this kind of a padam padam, so that we have tum ta da dum ta dum tum ta da dum, and then an end that is not elegant. It's an end that is ta da da dum chum chum. It might not be what we would agree this music to express, but just for the sake of expression, how can we change this last phrase to mean, yet never let the noble mind despair? Okay? Just again, the whole excerpt. It was very nice. Good. The work could continue for 3 hours and a whole lifetime, but I will think I'll close it here. And I will thank you so much. This was fantastic. It was extremely exciting to see it happening. So we'll open the floor for questions.
Thank you very much, João. And you too, despite the trouble with the stream, I think we managed to get the message here. For the audience at the other side of the line, there is a space for 1 or 2 questions eventually. So those who are following us in Teams, they could eventually forward this question either directly or in the chat. My question would be, we are talking about string players, and we are making our gestures most of the time with the bow. So have you ever experienced or experimented a little bit with that?
I haven't directly. I have thought about it many times. It does come up that it's so conspicuous that there is a gesture, and that gesture and the way it even starts as an upbeat resembles, of course, the breathing of someone that is about to say something in a certain affect. So definitely a place to look at. Yes.
That would be my first inclination, to just grab the bow and make the gestures with the bow.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
To get a kind of feel.
So I would say that yet never. I would say that there is a yet. that
for instance.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure.
Okay. If there are no questions coming, we just shut this session and we thank you again.
Good. Well, thank you. Thank you, everyone.
We'll see you sometime. Good.